Namaste, Dhanava Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Mahārāja, we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 1, Chapter 18, Text 28. Alabdhatrina bhumyadir asampratargya sunrita avagyatam ivatmanam manyamanaschukopoha. The king, not received by any formal welcome by means of being offered a seat, place, water, and sweet addresses, considered himself neglected, and so thinking he became angry. Purport. The law of reception in the codes of Vedic principles states that even if an enemy is received at home, he must be received with all respects. He should not be given a chance to understand that he has come into the house of an enemy. When Lord Krishna, accompanied by Arjuna and Bhima, approached Jarasandha in Magadha, the respectable enemies were given a royal reception by King Jarasandha. The guest enemy, namely Bhima, was to fight with Jarasandha, and yet they were given a grand reception. At night, they used to sit together as friends and guests, and in the day they used to fight, risking life and death. That was the law of reception. The reception law enjoins that a poor man who has nothing to offer his guest should be good enough to offer a straw mat for sitting, a glass of water for drinking, and some sweet words. Therefore, to receive a guest, either friend or foe, there is no expense. It is only a question of good manners. When Mahārāja Parīkṣit entered the door of Samika Rishi, he did not expect a royal reception by the Rishi, because he knew that saints and rishis are not materially rich men. But he never expected that a seat of straw, a glass of water, and some sweet words would be denied to him. He was not an ordinary guest, nor was he an enemy of the Rishi, and therefore the cold reception by the Rishi astonished the king greatly. As a matter of fact, the king was right to get angry with the Rishi when he needed a glass of water very badly. To become angry in such a grave situation was not unnatural for the king, but because the king himself was not less than a great saint, his becoming angry and taking action were astonishing. So it must be accepted that it was so ordained by the supreme will of the Lord. The king was a great devotee of the Lord, and the saint was also as good as the king. But by the will of the Lord, the circumstances were so created that they became ways to the king's becoming unattached to family connection and governmental activities, and thus becoming a completely surrendered soul unto the lotus feet of the Lord Krishna. And the merciful Lord sometimes creates such awkward positions, but his pure devotees, in order to drag them towards himself from the mire of material existence. But outwardly, the situations appear to be frustrating to the devotees. The devotees of the Lord are always under the protection of the Lord, and in any condition, frustration or success, the Lord is the supreme guide for the devotees. The pure devotees therefore accept all conditions of frustration as blessings from the Lord. Text 29. Abhuta purva sahasa kshutribhyam aridatmana pramanam pratya bhut brahman matsaro manyor evacha. O Brahmanas, the circumstances having distressed him with extreme hunger and thirst, the king directed toward the sage his anger and envy, which he had never before directed toward a Brahmana. Purport. For a king like Mahārāja Parīkṣit to become angry and envious, especially at a sage and a Brahmana, was undoubtedly unprecedented. The king knew well that Brahmanas, sages, children, women, and old men are always beyond the jurisdiction of punishment. Similarly, the king, even though he commits a great mistake, is never to be considered a wrongdoer. But in this case, Mahārāja Parīkṣit became angry and envious at the sage due to this thirst and hunger. By the will of the Lord, the king was right to punish his subject for coldly receiving him or neglecting him, but because the culprit was a sage and a Brāhmaṇa, it was unprecedented. As the Lord is never envious of anyone, so also the Lord's devotee is never envious of anyone. The only justification for Mahārāja Parīkṣit's behavior is that it was ordained by the Lord. Text 30. Satu Brahma Rishir Amse Gatasum Uragham Rusa Vinhir Gacham Danuskotya Nidhaya Puram Agata. While leaving, the king, being so insulted, picked up a lifeless snake with his bow and angrily placed it on the shoulder of the sage. Then he returned to his palace. Purport. The king thus treated the sage tit for tat, although he was never accustomed to such silly actions. By the will of the Lord, the king, while going away, found a dead snake in front of him, and he thought that the sage who had coldly received him thus might be coldly rewarded by being offered a garland of a dead snake. In the ordinary course of dealing, this was not very unnatural. But in the case of Mahārāja Parīkṣit's dealing with a Brāhmana sage, this was certainly unprecedented. It so happened by the will of the Lord. Text 31. Isha kimne britasesha karano militekshana mrisha samhadhir ahosvit kimnu chatra bandhubi. Upon returning, he began to contemplate and argue within himself whether the sage had actually been in meditation with senses concentrated and eyes closed, or whether he had just been feigning trance just to avoid receiving a lower kshatriya. Purport. The king, being a devotee of the Lord, did not approve of his own action, and thus he began to wonder whether the sage was really in a trance or was just pretending in order to avoid receiving the king, who was a kshatriya and therefore a lower rank. Repentance comes in the mind of a good soul as soon as he commits something wrong. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami do not believe that the king's action was due to his past misdeeds. The arrangement was so made by the Lord just to call the king back home, back to Godhead. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the plan was made by the will of the Lord, and by the will of the Lord, the situation of frustration was created. The plan was that for his so-called misdeed, the king could be cursed by an inexperienced Brahmana boy infected by the influence of Kali, and thus the king would leave his hearth and home for good. His connections with Srila Shukadeva Goswami would enable the presentation of the great Srimad Bhagavatam, which is considered to be the book incarnation of the Lord. This book incarnation of the Lord gives much fascinating information of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, like his Rasa Lila, with the spiritual cowherd damsels of Rajabhumi. This specific pastime of the Lord has a special significance because anyone who properly learns about this particular pastime of the Lord will certainly be dissuaded from mundane sex desire and be placed on the path of sublime devotional service to the Lord. The pure devotee's mundane frustration is meant to elevate the devotee to a higher transcendental position. By placing Arjuna and the Pandavas in frustration due to the intrigue of their cousin brothers, the prelude of the battle of Kuruksetra was created by the Lord. This was to incarnate the sound representative of the Lord, Bhagavad Gita. So by placing King Parīkṣit in an awkward position, the incarnation of Srimad Bhagavatam was created by the will of the Lord. Being distressed by hunger and thirst was only a show, because the king endured much, even in the womb of his mother. He was never disturbed by the glaring heat of the Brahmastra released by Asvatthama. The king's distressed condition was certainly unprecedented. The devotees, like Mahārāja Parīkṣit, are powerful enough to forbear such distresses by the will of the Lord, and they are never disturbed. The situation in this case was therefore all planned by the Lord. Text 32. Tasya putro tite jasvi Viharan Balako Rabkai, Pragyagam Prapitam Tatam, Shrutva Tatredam Abravit. The sage had a son who was very powerful, being a Brahmana's son. While he was playing with the inexperienced boys, he heard of his father's distress, which was occasioned by the king. Then and there the boy spoke as follows. Purport. Due to Mahārāja Parīkṣit's good government, even a boy of tender age, who was playing with inexperienced boys, could become as powerful as a qualified Brahmana. This boy was known as Shringi, and he achieved good training in Brahmacharya by his father, so that he could be as powerful as a Brahmana, even at that age. But because of the age of Kali, who was seeking an opportunity to spoil the cultural heritage of the four orders of life, the inexperienced boy gave a chance for the age of Kali to enter into the field of Vedic culture. Hatred of the lower orders of life began from this Brahmana boy, under the influence of Kali, and this cultural life began to dwindle day after day. The first victim of Brahminical injustice was Mahārāja Parīkṣit, and thus the protection given by the king against the onslaught of Kali was slackened. Text 33. Aho adharma palanam pivnam bali bujamiva shaminyagam yadasanam dvarapanam sunamiva. The Brahmana's son Shringi said, "Oh, just look at the sins of the rulers who, like crows and watchdogs at the door, perpetrate sins against their masters, contrary to the principles governing servants." Purport. The Brahmanas are considered to be the head and brains of the social body. The Kshatriyas are considered the arms of the social body. The arms are required to protect the body from all harm, but the arms must act according to the directions of the head and brain. That is a natural arrangement made by the supreme order, for it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that four social orders or castes, namely Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Sudras, are set up according to quality and work done by them. Naturally, the son of a Brahmana has a good chance to become a Brahmana by the direction of his qualified father, as a son of a medical practitioner has a very good chance to become a qualified medical practitioner. So the caste system is quite scientific. The son must take advantage of the father's qualification and thus become a Brahmana or a medical practitioner and not otherwise. Without being qualified, one cannot become a Brahmana or medical practitioner, and that is the verdict of all scriptures and social orders. Herein, Shringi, a qualified son of a great Brahmana, attained the required Brahminical power both by birth and by training, but he was lacking in culture because he was an inexperienced boy. But the influence of Kali, the son of a Brahmana, by the influence of Kali, the son of a Brahmana became puffed up with Brahminical power and thus wrongly compared Mahārāja Parīkṣit to crows and watchdogs. The king is certainly the watchdog of the state, in the sense that he keeps vigilant eyes over the border of the state for its protection and defense. But to address him as a watchdog is the sign of a less cultured boy. Thus, the downfall of the Brahminical powers began as they gave importance to birthright without culture. The downfall of the Brahmana caste began in the age of Kali, and since Brahmanas are the heads of social order, all other orders of society also began to deteriorate. This beginning of Brahminical deterioration was highly deplored by the father of Shringi, as we will find. Text 34. Brahmanai Kshatra Bandhorhi Grihapalo Nirupita Sakatam Ta Grihe Dvasta Subhandam Bhoktum Arhati. The descendants of the kingly orders are definitely designated as watchdogs, and they must keep themselves at the door. On what grounds can dogs enter the house and claim to dine with the master on the same plate? Purport. The inexperienced Brahmana boy certainly knew that the king asked for water from his father, and the father did not respond. He tried to explain away his father's inhospitality in an impertinent manner, befitting an uncultured boy. He was not at all sorry for the king's not being well received. On the contrary, he justified the wrong act in a way characteristic of the Brahmanas of Kali Yuga. He compared the king to a watchdog, and so it was wrong for the king to enter the home of a Brahmana and ask for water from the same pot. The dog is certainly reared by its master, but that does not mean that the dog shall claim to dine and drink from the same pot. This mentality of false prestige is the cause of downfall of the perfect social order. And we can see that in the beginning, it was started by the inexperienced son of a Brahmana. As the dog is never allowed to enter within the room and hearth, although it is reared by the master, similarly, according to Shringi, the king had no right to enter the house of Shamika Rishi. According to the boy's opinion, the king was on the wrong side and not his father, and thus he justified his silent father. Text 35. Krishne gate bhagavati shasthāryupatagaminam tadbhina setun adhyaham shasmi pasyata me balam. After the departure of Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead and supreme ruler of everyone, these upstarts have flourished, our protector being gone. Therefore, I myself shall take up this matter and punish them. Just witness my power. Purport. The inexperienced Brahmana, puffed up by a little Brahma Tejas, became influenced by the spell of Kali Yuga. Mahārāja Parīkṣit gave license to Kali to live in 4 places as mentioned herein before. But by his very expert government, the personality of Kali could hardly find the places allotted him. The personality of Kali Yuga, therefore, was seeking the opportunity to establish authority. And by the grace of the Lord, he found a hole in the puffed up, inexperienced son of a Brahmana. The little Brahmana wanted to show his prowess in destruction, and he had the audacity to punish such a great king as Mahārāja Parīkṣit. He wanted to take the place of Lord Krishna after his departure. These are the principal signs of upstarts who want to take the place of Sri Krishna under the influence of the age of Kali. An upstart with a little power wants to become an incarnation of the Lord. There are many false incarnations after the departure of Lord Krishna from the face of the globe, and they are misleading the innocent people by accepting the spiritual obedience of the general mass of people to maintain false prestige. In other words, the personality of Kali got the opportunity to reign through this son of a Brahmana, Shringi. Thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 36 on Wednesday, hopefully. All glories to Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Mahārāja Ki Jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Mahārāja, Srila Guru Dev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Mahārāja Ki Jai. All glories to our Rupa Nuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the worldwide devotees, to the assembled devotees, Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to Sri Navadvip Dham, Mayapur Dham, Nrsimhapuri Dham Ki Jai. Sri Navadvip Dham Parikram Ki Jai. Ekachakra Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sham Kund Radhakund Ki Jai. Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Pramanandi Hari 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 Bol. Dhanavad Pranams.